September 26th is finally here, and that means it is the release day for Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and that also means that I am in the early portions of this game and have a lot of thoughts about it, because as somebody, and I want to preface this in the very beginning of this video, as a lifelong Zelda fan, somebody who grew up with Ocarina of Time and proceeded to essentially fall in love with the series. I've 100%ed every Zelda game at least once. We won't talk about Triforce Heroes, but other than that, I find myself replaying over and over again the Zeldas that I do know and love, upwards of 40-50 times. Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, those type of games. But I also absolutely love and appreciate what has happened in the modern era of Zelda games, where a lot of new fans have been introduced to the series with the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom era games. And what's interesting about Echoes of Wisdom right out of the gate is it is very clear that it is a mixture of what the Zelda team has learned, with a more open approach to gameplay, way less restrictions as you the character, but still very much fitting the mold of a traditional top-down 2D Zelda, where you have your traditional dungeons, you have your mini keys, boss keys, heart pieces to collect as you traverse. But with the one massive gimmick and gameplay changer this time around, you're playing as Princess Zelda, not Link, and I have a lot of thoughts about that as well. So in this video, it will remain 100% spoiler free. All the footage you're going to see is from the very early portions of the game. I am only a few hours in myself, which is how I wanted to do this early gameplay impression / review, because I have a general feel for where the game is taking me at this point in time, but there's still so much mystery and so much I do not know, and that's where a lot of the excitement to this game is going to come into play. So the goal by the end of this video is all spoiler free. You will be able to make a decision on whether or not you want to buy into some of the hype around this game online and pick up Zelda Echoes of Wisdom for your Nintendo Switch collection right now or in the near future. Okay, so the first question I want to tackle is if you are somebody who traditionally very much enjoys playing as Link in a top-down 2D Zelda game, and you're questioning how is it going to feel playing as Princess Zelda this time around. Well, I do actually have a little bit of mixed feelings at the time that I am playing through this. I am fully committed and invested on the different ideas that we're going to be able to come up with to solve puzzles, and the Echoes mechanic, like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it. I'm really enjoying it so far. However, I do want to say one very minor spoiler warning. Skip ahead 10 seconds if you don't want to know how the game opens up initially, but you may have seen in a lot of the hands-on and preview videos, you actually start off this game as Link. It is a very brief section of gameplay, legitimately right at the beginning of the game, but it is one of those things where, with the more fluid camera movements and the jump ability that actually makes Link go a lot higher than he traditionally would in Zelda games, and having unlimited bombs, arrows, and your sword and shield traditionally, like, it was actually so much fun. I was entirely down to play the entire game as Link right when it opened up, and it almost, part of me, made me wish that that was actually a thing that you could do. However, we'll get to Swordfighter mode, which is kind of a tease of what that feels like, because it legitimately feels like you're playing that beginning part of the game when you do unlock Swordfighter mode. But nonetheless, something that's apparent very early on in this game from a gameplay perspective is that it feels like a step forward in the 2D top-down Zelda franchise, because if you're used to Link's Awakening and kind of how the game feels and controls, it feels very nice, but it's also kind of restrictive in a way. It does quite honestly feel like you are playing an HD version of a Game Boy era game, which is what that was. This, I feel like the movement multi-directionally feels a lot more streamlined and modern, not to mention just the little addition of the right analog where you can actually flick the camera forwards or backwards on any screen that you are on. It sounds like a really small addition, but it is a big one, because if you don't want to look all the way to the top of the screen and go walk there, you can just flick your camera stick up some, maybe walk only half as far to get up the screen to where you can kind of see the edge of what's available to you, and then you can come back to the traditional camera. I found myself using that new little tool in your arsenal quite regularly, and just controlling Princess Zelda in general feels very fluid, very responsive, and again, a step ahead of what we've had in the past for top-down 2D Zelda games. Now, in terms of how you're going to fight enemies, because this is going to be honestly the first frustration if you are a lifelong Zelda player like I am, where you know all the old top-down 2D games, you know how they control, and your first instinct is going to be, you see an enemy on screen, you run up, you sword slash them, you might shield if you need to. That is not how you're going to play this game at all. Rather, there is going to be initially a lot of slowdown and thinking, what echo do I want to use against this enemy? Now, as you progress throughout the game, you're going to be able to learn echoes that are both stationary items and moving live creatures. spoilers. And what I find is if it's an enemy, you're probably going to use another echo as an enemy to take them out once you start coming across more enemies. At the beginning, you might summon in a rock and throw it at them. You might use one of those spiny balls like I did originally. Once I learned that one, that was my go-to for a minute. But you're going to come across a ton of new echoes as you progress through the game, and you're going to constantly be using the newer ones that you've unlocked. You can still have your favorites, and in fact, you can sort them from your most used echoes to your most recently found, and a few different options that they have in there. I almost feel like they might need more, because once this game gets up to 100 plus echoes, like in that range, I don't even know how you're going to find everything that you want to be able to find. But it is a jarring feeling when you have to stop and think, how do I take out this Keese that is right in front of me, or this moblin throwing a spear at me? Like it's not as clear as you would think it is whenever you just have your traditional sword and shield. And so there is that initial pause and hesitation. Not to mention, once you do summon in an enemy, they don't always summon exactly where you want them. That is one minor complaint with the camera. Like if you're up against the bottom of a wall, you might summon one in and it lands kind of to the off side of the enemy. I've definitely noticed a few little small bugs like that. Nothing super frustrating, but there is that summon and echo wait and see period to how they're going to be able to handle the enemy, and they might actually just only be 1-to-1 as powerful as the enemy and die just as quick as you summon them in, and you might not even make entirely the progress you wanted to with the echo you chose. So as you get into the mindset of how this game kind of wants you to play it, that gets easier and easier as you go. Of course, as I mentioned, Swordfighter mode is something that is in this game and unlocked very early, just like you saw in the trailers. Don't worry, everything that Nintendo was showing us within most of the clips that we saw in those trailers is literally within the first few hours of the game, so you don't have to worry about too many spoilers that you've seen or heard about so far. But that Swordfighter mode, you're going to find it early on. Once you do initially, it is a pretty quick transformation. Like you can go right into Swordfighter Zelda mode, and then you're going to run out of your energy pretty quick. Now, fortunately, as you saw with the level 1 gauge that was very clear in the trailer, you can upgrade Swordfighter mode, but both from an energy perspective with how long it lasts, in addition to the damage of the sword itself and how strong it is against enemies. And that's what's really cool, because it does create this type of feeling where Swordfighter mode feels special, and when you're taking on something like a main dungeon boss that you also do pretty early in the game, you end up picking and choosing your time on when to transform and do maximum damage right whenever you're able to go spam the Y button and just go ham on the enemy. It actually does create a pretty satisfying feeling when you transform right when you need to and deal maximum damage. Now, in terms of traversing the Hyrule within this game, like there's fast travel points everywhere, just like we saw in the trailer. As you continue to build out your map, you're going to be able to get to really anywhere you want to go relatively quick. One thing I will say that feels very different in this top-down 2D Zelda compared to previous ones is the verticality, because yes, just like we saw in trailers, Zelda can use a bunch of different objects to stack on top of each other, and they essentially, with the echoes and even some of the enemy echoes like the spider web up, I mean, it almost makes anything on the table that you see. There was some chests pretty early on that I thought, there's no way I can get to the top of that mountainside so far. Surprisingly, you can. There's almost always a way to get vertically up if you just try and think long enough on how to solve that problem. And that is a new element of traversal in a top-down 2D Zelda game. It feels very weird to be able to scale the side of mountains relatively early on. Although one thing with the Tri-Rod is that it also levels up. You will be able to start to summon in more echoes at the same time once you do get that sufficiently leveled, which also helps you to scale up to higher heights than you could even right out of the gate in the game. But the ecosystem works very well, and obviously you can have so many summoned in at the same time. You can reset all the echoes you've summoned in with just the ZR button, or you can banish ones one at a time. Like, you have all the freedom to do that kind of stuff. And I've been very happy with what I've seen of this Hyrule so far in terms of what the map has to offer. Not to mention, and this is straight from the devs themselves, it's roughly 4 times as big as the Link's Awakening map. So that was already pretty large. This one's claimed to be 4 times as big. There's gonna be a lot of land to traverse here. Obviously, you have a horse to help you out get around this time around, and also all those travel points. Like, you're going to be set for getting to anywhere you want to go quickly, but it is quite honestly a massive map. The still world sections of the game are a pretty cool addition. It definitely has that more dark and eerie feel, and that's where, from my understanding so far in the game, is where you're going to be taking out the mainline dungeons in this game, which takes me to that section because yes, traditional dungeons are back. They're back in exactly the way you want them to be if you are a traditional Zelda fan, and I absolutely love finding small keys and boss keys. And of course, the one difference since your echoes are really your big item this time around, it's not that you're going to go and find that one big item in each dungeon that's going to allow you to progress further forward, but missing that small element from a linear traditional Zelda game from back in the day, it still very much feels like a traditional dungeon experience that you would want and love if you are a long-term Zelda fan. Now, one thing from a gameplay perspective that I do want to tackle that has become very clear to me early on is that, yes, this game's going to have some intense fast action combat moments, but they're going to be few and far between and more tied into kind of that Swordfighter mode when you're mashing buttons and kind of feeling like you're in that intensity mode. A lot of this, from what I can tell, is going to be very puzzle based, because it does feel like with the ecosystem, it is more of a how do you get through this screen that you are on? How do you take out the enemies that are in this room? And you kind of stop and think and plot and plan it out. This is definitely going to be a more puzzle focused top-down 2D Zelda experience. And if you're into more of the run-in hack and slash gameplay, this could be looked at absolutely as a negative from other traditional 2D Zeldas. I personally am very much enjoying the pacing of the game at this point in time, but I could absolutely understand the critique from fans that want it to be a little bit faster paced and less puzzle focused. This is going to be very puzzle focused. That said, where that Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild inspiration comes into play is that you don't have to solve the puzzle in one correct way. Rather, there might be 10 or 15 correct ways you can actually get through any kind of predicament that you find yourself in, because there's just that many options with the different echoes that you can summon in. Whether you bind to objects, use reverse bond, or just summon in that spider echo where it doesn't make sense to do just to give yourself a long web to climb up, you're going to find a lot of different solutions for where you're supposed to go in this game, and that's what's really cool about it. I don't foresee myself getting too stuck within this game on puzzles, just because there are so many different solutions and right ways to do it, and all it's going to take is for you to slow down and think, how can I tackle this with the echoes I have? And you'll probably find the solution relatively quickly. A few different interesting quality of life improvements for, of course, a top-down 2D Zelda for the first time is one, and you've seen this in the trailers, the addition of an adventure log. That is awesome. You have all of the markable icons you can throw on your mini map, which is very helpful to remember where things are at. And they've added something of a cooking system with the smoothies in this game. Not to mention, now your bottles are just a key item that whenever you encounter a fairy, it's just going to go straight into the bottle. So not necessarily the equipable item like you had before, but rather like an auto background item. I'm okay with all that stuff, and I do like all of the changes so far. I would also like to point out that you can play this game in hero mode or standard mode at any time, and you can flip between the two as you please. So if you are in that situation where you turned on hero mode, then you make it to a ridiculous boss that you just want to turn it off for that one moment and then turn it right back on afterwards, you can actually do that. From what I can see, I've been able to do it all the way up to where I'm at in the game, and I would expect it to be no different the further into the game you make it. So you make it all the way to the final boss and you decide to turn off hero mode and then turn it back on right after, technically you can do that. I don't know if the game indicates if you've turned it on or off, or gives you any kind of special badge if you don't do that, but that is a difficulty option that you can flip between at any time. That's available right out of the gate immediately as soon as you start the game. So all of this to say, my very early gameplay impression / review of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is extremely positive. Now, I'm not fully going to say this is going to be my favorite top-down 2D Zelda at this point in time. I cannot tell that personally, and there is a part of me that does feel like I'm going to miss some of the Swordfighter play that you just naturally want with a experience like this. But I'm very much open and excited to the idea of the new different type of echoes that I'm going to find, and actually play this game in a different way that I will no doubt enjoy the further into it I get. So it is a heavy recommendation from me to Zelda fans. If you're a fan of traditional top-down 2D Zelda experiences, you will likely very much enjoy this game. If you just want a sword hack and slash experience, and that is your bread and butter for a top-down 2D Zelda, you don't have that all the time. You do have to play this game very differently than those other ones, and you might feel like there's something more to be desired when you are completing Echoes of Wisdom. But for me, I personally am ready for everything this game holds, all the traditional dungeons, all the boss fights at the end of them, art piece hunting, knocking out the side quests. I'm here for all of it. This is a very exciting, fresh Zelda experience, and definitely a recommendation from me so far, even at a full $60 price point. So let me know in the comments down below how you feel about Echoes of Wisdom so far, if you've gotten a chance to play it yet. If not, are you on the fence? What's kind of holding you back from potentially picking it up? Or are you planning on getting it today and popping it in your Switch as soon as you get some time? And now that the reviews are out there and everyone has the game in their hands, are you more or less excited about it? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.